Hello everyone. Today, I'm excited to share with you a powerful way to crush the Scandinavian defense in just about 8 moves. Not only that, but I'll also provide you with a complete overview of this opening gambit. I've noticed that many players rely on a single trick when using this defense, and if it fails, they often crumble and lose. In this lesson, I'll show you how to handle opponents who know about the trap and still outplay them effectively. So, let's dive right in. The Scandinavian defense begins when black plays pawn to d5 and after that, you take. Black usually recaptures. You play knight c3, attacking this queen. And the classical variation goes queen to a5. In this case, the usual way is to go d4, but there is an interesting gambit line, pawn b4. And what's really funny about this version is that, and we're gonna see the first game where it was played, people still keep falling into this trap over and over again. And according to the database, in most games, black actually keeps failing it up to this date. So, first of all, white is attacking the queen, therefore, black needs to do something about that. Probably they're gonna capture, and although you lost a pawn, this is a classical gambit style where you sacrifice a pawn, so that you get more open files for your pieces. You also keep attacking black, keep gaining tempos by attacking this queen, and so you hope for quick development and attack. So, that's the general overview. Now, more specifically, going on b5 here, you keep attacking. This time you're threatening to capture this pawn and to fork the king and the rook. And for that reason, black needs to do something about this pawn. Of course, black can move, theoretically, the king somewhere here, but that would expose the king. If the knight moves here to a6 to defend the pawn that way, that will put the knight on the edge of the board, which is not recommended to do strategically. So, the move which most players play here is the correct one, queen to a5. Defending the pawn that way and also putting the queen back to safety, just in case white can attack it here somehow. After queen a5, you play the move, which seems like just a development move, bishop c4. And at this point, black feels happy. Black is a pawn up, and your attack is seemingly over. So, black thinks, okay, let me just get rid of this annoying knight, and I can simply enjoy a position where I'm a pawn up. And most players play here pawn c6, which is a standard move in the Scandinavian defense in general. But in this particular case, it's a losing mistake. The other one, which is equally bad, is pawn a6 and is also equally popular. But let's start with the move pawn c6. And once again, after that, I'm going to share with you what to do if your opponent is aware of the trap and how you can win anyway. Because they see that, otherwise, people just play it as a whole chess game, just relying on this one little trick, and that's it. But that's not really good because, if you just rely on a single little trick, then you're going to lose, unfortunately, if your opponent is aware of it. Anyway, let's first see the main trap. After pawn c6 there is a crushing blow. Bishop takes f7, certainly very hard to see it. So, even advanced level players will probably overlook these tactics because, yeah, it's just so hard to spot it during the real game. And after king takes, white follows up with queen h5 check. It still seems unclear why white would keep sacrificing material. Because although this is check, the king seems like black can cover it in different ways. For example, just pawn g6 looks like white's attack is over, and indeed you can't attack the king anymore. But the whole point of keeping the queen here was not only to attack the king but also to attack the queen over here on a5. And so, here you can take advantage of the discovered check when you go knight to d6, which is check to the king, and you open up this line for your queen to pick up black's queen on a5. So, after pawn takes, you take over here on a5, and you just won a queen in the game. Going back to the actual game where this trap was played first. Black noticed the threat and realized that they had to address this discovered check threat somehow. For that reason, the king cannot also move to e6 because knight d4 will still be the check, and it still loses the queen after that. So, king e6 is not an option either. The only way for black to get rid of the potential threat is to play king to f6. But of course, there is a major downside to putting your king so advanced and so exposed. Which is that white can simply keep attacking it. That's what white did with bishop b2, check to the king. Now, in order to cover, black has to play e5. Then bishop captures this pawn. Check to the king once again, and as the king moves somewhere, it doesn't matter, e6 or e7, you follow up with knight to c7. This creates an extremely beautiful position actually. It's really satisfying to play this. The checkmating threat is not easy to see at first. You may actually think about this yourself for a second. The checkmating threat is queen e8, and that would be checkmate, really beautiful. But besides that, if black covers that somehow, for example by playing g6 or something else, that fails to yet another discovered check. Let's say bishop d6, check to the king, and once again we're opening up this line and picking up the queen. So, it's a really astonishing combination, and while it wins, it's also really effective. If you're going to play this gambit, you've got to know a few other lines. Here, after pawn takes d5, queen takes, knight c3, well, first of all, of course, black can move their queen somewhere else, not only to a5. For example, queen d8 or something else. With other traps in the Scandinavian defense and other side operations. But for this video, let's stick to the classical line, queen a5, and we're going to gamble the pawn here. Pawn b4, queen takes, knight b5. One common error that I see here in this position is that some players believe that the rhythm of queen h5 wins just as well. We know that the correct move is bishop takes f7 first, right, and then queen h5. But I see that some players play queen h5 right away, thinking that it's basically the same thing. They're threatening queen takes f7, thanks to this bishop's support. In addition to that, it still threatens knight d6 check to the king, and it opens up this line to win the queen. At first, it looks like it really works. For example, if black plays something like g6 to block this diagonal, then indeed knight d6, and white wins the queen because this is check. But here, it's important to know that it's not the case. In fact, black can win the game here if they know how to respond properly. The way for black to get rid of this discovered check is just to move the king away. After that, there is a similar problem happening for white. Now, this knight is pinned to the queen. It can't move anymore. For that reason, black is going to capture it on the next move. Of course, here queen takes f7 looks very advantageous for white, but there is a move, knight to h6, which defends this bishop and also attacks the queen. This knight is still hanging, so black is going to win it on the next move and will gain a material advantage, ultimately winning the game. So, that's a common error. That's not how white wins here. Alright, now let's take a look at the proper moves for black. We know that tempting moves such as pawn c6 or pawn a6 both lose to these tactics. Bishop takes f7, followed by queen h5. That's how black loses. What should black do instead? If someone turns on Stockfish on Lichess, then Stockfish suggests the move knight to c6. This indeed stops white's tactics because, from here, the knight defends the queen. Therefore, black can't lose the queen anymore in the following variations, and the sacrifice does not work for white. What do you do then? I recommend the move bishop b2. Because in this case, the drawback of keeping the knight here on c6 without playing pawn to c6 is that this queen on a5 is a little bit restricted. And potentially you want to play bishop c3 and put some pressure on it there. Let's not forget that the queen should defend this pawn. And so, although theoretically, full disclosure, this whole variation is risky for a while. Do not play it against a well-prepared strong opponent in a serious game. If you bet a lot of money on it, but for a casual blitz game on the internet, it is perfectly fine because still it's tricky. It's still not easy for black to figure out what to do here. For example, in this position, the most common move for black here is knight to f6, which is wrong. Because then you actually execute your threat, bishop c3, hitting the queen. The queen needs to keep guarding this pawn, so it's gonna go back. And now, you play rook b1, which puts this potential x-ray on the queen, and it can't run away because it's gotta keep guarding the pawn. So, if black goes something like pawn e6, trying to somehow get rid of your annoying pieces, you're gonna still use the discovered check. It's somehow funny how black always loses their queen to a discovered check, even though in this case it's going along this file instead of this horizontal line. Okay, so knight e6 check, after black captures it, you win the queen anyway. And black's position is also destroyed. You can capture here as well, and, black's position is completely ruined, and you won some material. So, let's say queen h5, and that should be easily winning for white. Thanks for watching.